This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. This is an interesting situation for the Browns to get into the bye week. I mean, physically, I think it's a good week for them to be in the bye week, but there's a lot of other stuff lingering with them that it would be like, man, if they could just get to the point where we get a practice report, see an injury report or something like that, it would probably be less of a circus. But this is we knew the week 4 bye week was going to be weird here. One, Jake, do you think you've been able to see enough with this offense to make any real tangible adjustments to get better? Or is it just like, hey, we need to fix some of these holes in this offense? And is it that, right? Because I think there's a clear difference between, hey, we just need to clean this stuff up and then we can fix that at the bye versus we need to throw water on this fire.
Well, I would say, in the midst of what I think is a sort of, I'm not saying it's a franchise altering situation here, but I think it's a current coaching staff defining situation. The offense is something I've been hitting on a lot. If any of your listeners listen to my podcast or any other places my ugly mug appears, like I have been pretty ardent about the style that they go about the offense for a while. They displayed a type of offense that I thought was really strong for the direction I think they should go when they debuted with Deshaun Watson in Houston last year. They ran their highest volume of RPOs, their highest volume of inside zone, and it was an ugly game. We could all agree, so I think that what happened in that game, though, is very obvious to me, right? It's a team going from a Jacoby Brissett and Baker Mayfield driven concept, very much a 2016 through 2021 type of offense, the Kubiak stuff, what Kevin knows best. And they were transitioning in a very short period of time to what Deshaun handled really well in 2020 and made him a special quarterback. And that didn't look good because why? Deshaun Watson's making a debut back in Houston as the pariah, right? You got a team that's used to handling stuff one way that's trying to do something completely different. And I think there was a gigantic overreaction to the way that looked in that game. They threw out all of that. They didn't go back to it. They finished the rest of the year with what the Browns know best under Kevin Stefanski. And I thought this offseason there would be a return to that where they got more time to work together, right, Quincy, where they got more time to work together, to work through the design, to work through what could be the most effective. And they have not done any of that. And that has been jarring, to say the least, for me. I certainly kind of understand why you want to keep some of the old Kubiak angles in Kevin's system because of the Nick Chubb, right? Because he does it well and he can make big plays out of that look. And I think personally Nick Chubb's pretty malleable. He can make plays out of almost any run design. So I just was disappointed the direction that they went with this offense. And my sort of like indicators of a successful buy would be the incorporation of these things to take easy money that they can find every week through, again, if you're thinking about where does your offense struggle, right? It's protection right now. They're not standing up in protection. They're not getting the football out on time. And those are two things that like run pass options are designed to help with, to alleviate the burden of your offensive line. There are elements of that stuff to the gun play action stuff to really help your offensive line and get the football out quickly. And they don't have any of that stuff baked in. And, why would, you would ask the question, why would you feel optimistic they can reshape the stuff in the bye week? Well, because they at least tried it when Watson came back in Houston. They gave it a go. I'm really disappointed how quickly they pulled the plug on that. And I have larger questions about why you make a decision to go get Deshaun Watson just to plug him into the same type of system that, two quarterbacks not like him were using before. So, listen, I'm at a teetering point for myself personally about the ability to see the big picture that makes modern NFL offense work with the type of players that the Browns have. And, so what do you need to do at the bye? There are some wholesale things I would try to be doing, but I don't know if they're willing to do that. There's a rigidity in which Kevin sees offense. He has not brought people in to challenge him necessarily. It's always been Van Pelt, finally brought in Bill Musgrave, but what's the impact there? I haven't seen any impact based on what Bill was running at Cal. So I don't know any impact there. And like Drew Petzing is over in Arizona, finding himself a lot of success, incorporating a lot of quarterback run game. They have the NFL's second or third best run depth in terms of where, the first contact is happening on run plays. They have the eighth most explosive offense in Arizona, led by Josh Dobbs. So like, was Drew Petzing here being sort of, muzzled? Like he didn't have an opinion. I'm sort of at an impasse for a guy like me. I don't know, you maybe don't pay as close attention to what I say, Quincy, but like I've been pretty ardent Kevin defender, and I don't know how we can keep the status quo of offense, which is very predictable, mundane, lacking motion, 22nd in motion percentage in the NFL. It doesn't create easy things for the system, for the quarterback, anywhere near enough as it needs to, and just think that is okay. Like the Browns are 25th in run efficiency right now, and there's a lot of people like, hey, this is why they're not running it, because you can't do that. Like you can't just throw your hands up in a game and say, well, we can't run it, can't figure it out. We're gonna have to have this rookie quarterback throw it all the time. Like there's too many things that are going in a direction that I'm not comfortable with right now. And I'm teetering. It's early. The season story hasn't been written. I'm just teetering on what I think the best thing for the future is, because as I sit here, if they keep the status quo of the offense, I really do think that you're looking at the best they'll do. They'll beat some teams they have better talent than. They've played some good defenses so far, so they'll be fine. They'll beat some teams that they're better than, and probably you can get to 9-8, 10-7, but then you're going to get boat raced in the playoffs. You're going to get beat up by Miami or Buffalo or something, because they're very cap limited by what they can do offensively. And when you're all in, Quincy, man, and you're like trying to push in to be a real Super Bowl contender, and this is the level by which you're giving yourself a chance to be great. I didn't even care if you came out this year and you struggled offensively to start the year, because it was like a completely different structure and you're trying to work out the kinks, and then maybe mid-year or late year you're peaking. But they're not doing any of that. They're very capped, and I don't think that their ceiling is as high as we want to think it is based on the offense, which is a real bummer, because they do have a Super Bowl level defense.
Yeah. So one of the questions I have is just like, with the Kubiak style, the Shanahan style is kind of what we call it now. One of the things I see consistently with these offenses is that when it becomes time to adjust to a different than standard play style, like when it's not Kirk Cousins, when it's not, the regular drop back quarterback, they struggle to integrate those kind of players, right? We saw this with RG3, where there was all this tension between Shanahan and him and how to integrate him. We've seen it with Trey Lance, whether Trey Lance is just not a good player or not, still struggled to integrate him in a way that they could integrate, Mr. Irrelevant and Brock Purdy with. And it becomes a question of like, hey, is this offense just not as malleable as we want it to be, or is as the people who run it want it to be? Like, is it a issue of just the base of the offense, the being based in the Shanahan style? Is that part of the problem when it's like, hey, you try to change some things and it's just not compatible anymore?
Well, I think, if you look at like the adaptation of where these guys are going, let me just kind of put it bluntly. I think there's a tier in which the McVays and Shanahans and McDaniels are in right now, and Kevin's not sniffing it. He's not as innovative. He's not as forward thinking. I thought there were moments where he could be that type of guy. I really did, but I don't think he brings in enough people around him to challenge him and keep up on what's moving forward, where things are going. Like if you look at under center play action percentage, the teams that you would think, right, off the cuff, the teams you would think that are doing the most of that are not the teams that are doing the most of that. And especially those teams like San Francisco and LA have moved away from a lot of that under center play action, largely because teams cover it so well because they've seen it for so long now. It's been the Kubiak, and really it's a Shanahan born, not Kyle, his dad, It was
Mhm.
born through those two, passed down to the younger ones now, and these guys of that young core of offensive minds dating back to those Washington days have sort of spread it throughout the NFL. It is just everywhere, and teams are seeing it. So defenses, if 60-70% of defenses, Quincy, are seeing it, and even their daily practices getting ready for a season, they just cover it. Gone are the days of bootlegs where you could either dump it off for 20 yards for an easy throw, or you got that deep bomb over the top. Like, the teams are better at defending it. So there are the smart minds are working away from that. They're working in different directions to try to come up with answers. We've seen Miami do unique and fun things. We've seen the way that the Rams have done similar. They're moving people all the time. They're doing a lot of lateral motion. They're getting Puka into like they'll put him in flat motion and then have him release through the line of scrimmage to run a deep over route. Like the way you go watch these other teams, and even if you want to look at the teams that I think the Browns should be emulating a ton, which is the Steichen Sirianni tree right now, which is running Philly and Indy, like they're doing really unique things, pairing run game and the ability to throw off of it, not just in RPOs, but some of the play action gun stuff that I'm just watching it, man, and I'm jealous. I'm jealous that these people have figured out the way in which defenses are uncomfortable. You would think, the most popular stuff, if you look at even over a decade now, like inside zone's very popular at the high school, college levels, but it's faded out in the NFL level. And like, you have to think about what defenses are used to defending versus what they're not. And the way that the sweeping nature of that wide zone system took over the NFL, teams are so good at defending it now. Now you're asking Kevin to change the only, again, he came up, he played defense through his college career. Like, he's not an OG, like, offensive mind here. He's learned it. He has learned one system that he was in Minnesota for a long time. So he learned a system from Kubiak. He's noted as saying, if I ever got to call plays, this is the system I would like to run. He's honed in that type of system. The problem is you cannot have one system in the NFL these days because teams figure out how to take away your answers, man. And I'm just perplexed how you can have the same people around you all the time. You don't bring anybody in to challenge your thought process or give you ideas to change. Like, I'm just disappointed. I really had high hopes based on the offseason and the early part of the preseason that they were going to be a bread and butter inside zone team and really branch off RPOs and do fun things that you could create easy yards, and they're not doing any of it. And I'm sure you're watching it, your audience is watching it, saying 5 yards for this offense is hard. It's just hard. They can't find 5 to 7 yards, man. And yeah, they'll pick up some first downs where they'll have a nice run for 9 yards, running Harrison Bryant sneak, or just get enough to, they're not like, if you look at some of the statistics out there about like teams with the highest 3 and out percentage, the Browns aren't very high on that. That's okay. But they're getting to the like, they go between the 45 and the other 45. And there's a consistent stall out process that happens there for them where they cannot push it. And then they get maybe inside the 40, and then they stall out there too. They cannot string together because they don't have enough answers inside of what they do to create enough deception when it comes down to making the 8th, 9th, 10th play of a drive to keep a team confused, man. So it is they're in a rough spot, rougher than I think. Again, I'm not trying to come on to some shows and do my own show and spread negativity, but I do think the offense is in a rougher place than people want to admit.
Yeah. As the week goes on, I'm getting more and more to that place where I'm like, a lot of this stuff kind of, it reminds me of 2021, the same issues we had with the offense then, right? When it was Baker throwing the ball, and maybe we were like, oh, it's this and that with him, but it's a lot of the same plays, a lot of the same structure issues. And I just start to wonder, is that something that Watson can overcome? We saw him have a good game against the Titans. Like, how much do you think that affects things? Like, if Watson gets back to, let's say he plays well, I don't know what that looks like. It's hard to say 2020 without factoring the offense, but let's say he's back to being himself, but he's in his offense. Do you think that's enough to get you through this year?
I think Deshaun, you can hope he pulls off some hero ball stuff. You can always hope that he does some of those things, but he needs to be protected. His best passing marks this year are coming when he's protected. When there's pressure, that's what he's struggling in any quarterback. Most quarterbacks don't thrive under pressure, right? There's some cases where a guy rides a heater and can figure it out for a little while, but the more pressure a quarterback faces, the more prone they are to mistakes. So I'm not trying to say Deshaun is something different than anybody else's, but what I'm getting at here is the way that the left tackle position is being played at a rate, some of the worst in the NFL right now. Joel's not playing good football right now. I don't think Wyatt Teller is playing up to his level. Ethan Posich looks more like the guy who came back from injury late last year than the guy in the early portions of the year, finishing the year strong. Now, DeWanda's been fine, but he had a couple high side arc issues on the right side last game. My point is they're not protecting well. And like what this offense needs, if Kevin is unwilling to do some of the quick throw stuff that you want, is a level of protection that I don't think they have, right? So if Deshaun wants to hold on to it, sure, but you're going to take a lot of sacks, and he can create some plays here and there, but like if you look at the data, man, anytime you take a sack or a holding call on a drive, you're talking like 9% of drives are successful. And they're running into these issues where they're one of the highest sack teams in the NFL right now, and they're one of the highest penalized teams in the NFL right now from a holding perspective. So it's really, really hard, man, to just beam with optimism that Kevin can get under center, run the wide zone stuff he wants to run, then get in the gun and have people actually fear their gun run game enough to have play action matter from the gun. Then it's just sitting 3-step, 5-step drops with guys that aren't protecting well. And it's like, then it makes everything hard. It makes everything so hard for them to find success consistently because defenses are on their toes against the Browns. They're not on their heels. They know what's coming for the most part. They have a vibe. They know the film study is solid. I'm telling you, you can tell a defense when they're playing forward-thinking football, reactionary ball because they trust what they've been taught and the tendencies they know versus a defense that's on their heels because they don't know what the hell is coming. And right now the Browns, in a large portion of late last year, defenses have a feel for what's coming, man.
Yeah, it's not great. Let's talk about the wide receivers because I think there's been a lot of focus on quarterback. There's been a lot of focus on the offensive line. And outside of Cooper, and Cooper's a good player, but Cooper's not one of these guys that's going to like change an offense for you, change a game for you, right? Like he's always been a really solid, dependable piece. Are we seeing enough separation from these wide receivers? Like, is it been there either? Because when I look at them, I'm not overly impressed with anything that I'm seeing. And there's some areas like Donovan Peoples-Jones where I'm like, what is he doing this year? Like, the effort just doesn't seem super high at times from him.
No, I don't think they're doing enough to create separation. Now, lining up in either a 2x2, 3x1, or empty where you're 3x2 typically, I don't think it's one of the hardest things to do. But if you're going to face teams that play man coverage on third down, which Tennessee did a little bit of it, but Baltimore did more of it. The Bengals did a ton of it. It's very hard against the twitchy NFL defensive backs to create separation fast enough against those heavy blitzes, right? To matter. So what I think the issue is here, and this is like I'd say 80% of the issue, they don't do enough things creatively to create help for their wide receivers. They don't do enough motion. They don't do enough bunch alignment, switch release, natural pick plays. They don't do enough of any of that. I don't see that level of third down man situation. We've dictated they're playing man. I don't see enough creativity there to make it work. They did a good job against Tennessee of knowing a tendency where they would put a linebacker out wide and kind of have him play one-on-one man coverage against a running back despite everybody else playing zone. They exploited that with Jerome Ford for that first touchdown against Tennessee, but I have not seen many more examples of them creating natural rubs, difficult things for teams to handle with bunched alignments where you have to communicate the inside outside, like, it's banjo coverage. So you're taking first in, I'm taking first out. You have first vertical. Like they're lining up in a very spaced out fashion very often, and they are not making it difficult. Like teams can just literally straight up play press or catch man, and they have no issue with any sort of thing outside of like a release or a motion or an exchange of responsibility, because maybe you have two men on the left side and the farthest outside number one goes in motion inside of number two. That creates an exchange of rules where now this nickel has to chase number two because he just became number one and I have to stay with the outside guy. You know what I'm saying there? Like, you create madness or chaos. Sometimes teams will handle that well, sometimes teams won't, but you have to at least give this opportunity for some of the things you can do pre-snap to mess with it. I mean, if you want to look at something that's that I find interesting, is look at which teams use motion the most. So if I were to go, and I can sort this out of just specific dropbacks, plays that include motion and inside of those dropbacks, you're going to find the teams that are operating at the highest level. I mean, the Chiefs, the team at the top is the Dolphins, the 49ers, the Chiefs are in the top 5. And let me make sure I'm getting this last one right. It looks like the Commanders, who are actually running a relatively effective offense, are also inside the top 5. So like, you're talking about teams that use motion the most are teams that, are finding success in offense across the league, the teams that you're trying to emulate more often than not. So it's frustrating, man. It's a really frustrating thing that they can't see what I think is pretty obviously working across the NFL. But again, that's going to define who they are ultimately, Quincy, is whether they can figure these things out or not.
Yeah, so let's go realistic best case scenario for this offense. What do you feel like it is at this point? Do you think that there's something in that building that can spur a little bit of a change there when it comes to the philosophy? Because I don't get the sense from how you've been talking about it that this is as simple as we execute better on the offensive line, things get better, we're fine. It's more of there needs to be a visible change in philosophy at times here.
Yeah, I want to make sure I correct myself just a second ago. So your motion teams, here's your top 8. You tell me which ones you like. Miami, Kansas City, San Francisco, LA Rams, the Falcons. Even though if they had just Desmond Ridder swapped out, I think we could agree that they would probably be a little bit better. The Chargers, the Packers, the Ravens. Those are teams that are using the motion the highest amount of plays this year. So they're like the Dolphins are using motion 75% of the time. The Browns are using it 41% of the time. Teams at the bottom of the NFL, there's only a very unique set of 2 teams that do things unique, like the Philadelphia and Indy teams, but they're using post-snap motion, which is RPOs, right, at a heavy percentage. So anyway, I want to make sure I corrected that for your audience. But so you're asking, what do I think is like the future here? What do I think is the best? I think, like I said earlier, they should be changing to what they tried to run in week 12 of last year, which is a ton of RPOs. Inside zone is your base blocking concept paired off of it. And here's why I say inside zone. Outside zone and wide running concepts from the gun take high levels of anticipation and vision from a running back, right? They take really challenging, some of the more challenging things running backs have to do in the run game. You have to anticipate, should I bounce this? Should I bang this up inside or should I cut it back? Those are challenging. You have to read blocks, anticipate blocks, set up one direction to put your foot in the ground, cut up field for another. I think inside zone is a very simplified A gap to A gap read where you have your hardest, the strongest parts of your Browns offensive line, your guard, center guard, who have to play better, but they're your best group as the anchoring point of moving defensive tackles off the line of scrimmage. So to me, it simplifies things for your running backs. It simplifies things for your offensive line. It creates more north-south movement, which I think you and I could agree they need more of, less east-west movement in the backfield with this group of running backs. I think it makes the most sense. So I think, to me, a huge indicator is that's your baseline run concept, and you're basing everything you do off of it around those run concepts. Now, you can do some gap stuff, some power, a little bit of counter from the gun, but I think they should be a heavy gun team, upwards of 80% of gun usage. I think that's the baseline. A lot of 11 personnel. When you do use 12 personnel, how about we get Jordan Akins involved a little bit? Guy goes from a dominating force at times for the Texans last year is just non-existent this year for Cleveland. Find that to be a little bit jarring. So I would like to see 11 and 12 personnel are your usage points, and then sprinkling in more RPOs upwards of double digits a game, because I think you have a quarterback who's accustomed to doing them, and there are easy options that you should be able to take from those looks. And then a lot of your play action game should be from the gun. Like, I think that that's something that teams are not using enough of. And I think the Browns have to get better at using gun play action. Like, I'm telling you, man, teams that are running that under center play action it's not in any way what people think it is from that play action percentage. If you're talking non-shotgun play action, teams at the bottom, the Dolphins, 49ers. Like, that's crazy when you think about that.
Mm-hmm.
The Rams are only 15th in play action from under center. So that tells you a very clear story about the smartest minds. Kansas City, 16th, are in the bottom half of the NFL in under center play action percentage, because it's not what it used to be. It's not the cheat code that we've been led to believe it was. And I think that, listen, who's got the highest play action percentage, Quincy, and shotgun? Miami, Seattle. Drew Petzing in Arizona is third. The Chargers are fourth. Baltimore's fifth. Philly seventh. Like, some of the best ones. San Francisco's all the way up at 17, going from 32nd in the grouping I was just telling you about. Like, I just don't understand how we can't see this, man. So I'm perplexed at the lack of an understanding here. It's kind of jarring. I hope that they can alter it. They've shown a willingness. I would be less optimistic they could do it if they hadn't shown that they wanted to do it last year. I think taking the lumps as you go in this upcoming portion of the schedule is a wise way to do it, to try to peak by the end of the year. But again, is Kevin willing to do that? Is he willing to step away from the rigidity, step away from what he knows best, to get uncomfortable? And I don't have any evidence he's willing to do that, man.